This was the week the cost of living crisis got so bad that even the Pope is looking for roomies.
Father Ray Flores, an Augustinian, the same religious order as the Pope, hosted Pope Leo when he was Cardinal Prevost a year ago at St. Jude's in New Lenox.
We're just so thrilled that he was elected, that he's our Augustinian brother, that we know him so well, that we're connected to John. It's incredible.
That we may be able to do something with our own lives to serve others.
Father Ray Florence, in an interview with NBC Chicago on Saturday. He was sitting next to the Pope's brother, by the way, John Prevost. That's who he was referring to there. Rebecca, what's the story?
So the story is that this week, La Repubblica, the Italian daily, revealed that Pope Leo XIV is planning, when he moves into the papal palace, which he hasn't done yet, to have flatmates. I mean, I'm just joshing around. It's not a cost of living crisis situation. The reasons haven't been revealed. We can get into that. But the gist of it is that they are going to be sharing a 10-room papal apartment within the palace. There's plenty of room in there for them. There is a library, there is a study, there's even a medical suite, which is probably needed because 3 of the last 6 popes did die in the papal apartments. So there's plenty of amenities. Unfortunately for, if you're listening and thinking that sounds like something I might enjoy the sound of, the word is that he has already chosen the people who'll be living with him, and it may not surprise you to know that they are all Augustinian friars.
Yes, and that's the point, isn't it, Arion? People have said, what makes this pope different? The last pope seemed so different in a lot of the decisions that he made. One of the things is that he is from an Augustinian order. Their whole thing is about living together as brethren and all the rest of it.
Yeah, exactly. Augustinians really value relationships and friendship in particular very highly. And in moving in with a group of other Augustinian friars alongside him in the papal apartments, Leo is said to be trying to create a kind of community setting, much like how, say, US presidents do, moving their family into the White House, or the UK Prime Minister getting their family into Downing Street or whatever. But in his public addresses, Pope Leo has also regularly emphasized fraternity and friendship as being essential for peace. And these are really kind of core Augustinian ideas. The view of the order is that the path to peace and the path to knowledge are both journeys that are taken in the company of others, and particularly with your friends. And many even say that it's through friendship that God finds them. In fact, there's a sermon from Augustine, who is the 4th century theologian and philosopher after whom the Augustinians were named, in which he tells his congregation, I don't want to be saved without you. It's a really powerful expression of the communal sort of sense of salvation, emphasizing this idea that faith and redemption, they're not things that you can do alone. You have to do them with others. So I think that is the symbolism, at least, of what's going on here.
But, Felicity, the Vatican, it's also a political organisation in so many ways, isn't it? And, this strikes me as a little bit like a prime minister having his personal advisor on hand, unelected, not necessarily part of the party machine. The Pope's going to have his closest mates and advisors. And what are they going to discuss in the evening? They're going to talk about all the things that, he's been talking about with the Vatican machine, but he's going to get an honest take from them. You can see how very quickly that could be something that people around them might resent.
Possibly, but I think it's a really good thing. I think it's a really bold move. I mean, he already sort of wields so much power, and it's not really a democratic process as to how the Pope gets elected. He's been quoted as saying the Pope is not a lone leader or a leader placed above others. The idea that I think he's going to consult widely and need to talk to people about the decisions he makes, especially with so many issues going on in the world, seems like a really positive step forward. And it's in stark contrast to Francis, who he worked alone and he made decisions alone. And I would say that as a leader in general, to be able to have the humility and wisdom to consult as many people around you is a really, really good thing. So I think that's really interesting. But I think the kind of how he is positioning himself in contrast to Francis is really, really interesting, because obviously Francis had this reputation of being very, very humble and lowly, and he didn't live in the Vatican apartments, and he didn't have the fancy car, and he didn't wear the fancy clothes. And
a Pope the Guardian could get behind.
Yeah, he did, exactly. He didn't holiday at the papal summer residence. And Leo has actually decided to reinstate that tradition of going to Castel Gandolfo outside of Rome. I think it was partly because the heat in Rome was so awful. And I think when he first appeared at St. Peter's Square, he was back wearing the gold cross around his neck and wearing silver pendant and the embroidered stole. So he is sort of moving back to the more traditional image that we have of the Pope as being quite grand and having all the trappings. But it's just quite interesting how he is putting his own stamp on it and sort of making his own papacy known, I suppose.
Yeah, what have Catholics made of this decision so far, Rebecca? It seems to me quite hard, actually, to get a grip on what people think about this.
Yeah, well, I mean, the news is only relatively recently broken, but the response, at least from Vatican analysts, has been one of surprise. I think his decision to move back into the papal palace after it had been empty for 12 years under Pope Francis was seen broad. I mean, of course, the Catholic Church is very divided, but I think was broadly seen as a positive sign, especially among conservatives who were very alarmed by some of Francis's, not only his reforms to the church, but also his personal decisions. I mean, when you say, I would like to be humble like Jesus and not live in these fancy apartments and not wear these fancy clothes, there's no way really to say that without there being an undertone of shade to your predecessors who did do those things. So that was alarming to a lot of people. So I think what Leo is trying to do is establish that he, on one hand, is returning to tradition and orthodoxy, that he's not shying away necessarily from the trappings of the papacy either, but that he's trying to do it in a way that injects some of that same humility that Catholics and the world at large responded to well in Francis. So we can see him sort of threading the needle in lots of ways. One, moving into the apartments, but he's going to be there with his Augustinian brothers. It's going to be on a more equal basis, we can assume. Certainly the idea that we can glean, but also even the visit to the summer papal palace in Castel Gandolfo, he went there. Francis never went there, but when he was there, he did host a mass and a lunch for the homeless people of the area while he was in town. So you can see he's trying to make statements that will communicate to the clergy and to the Catholic lay people that he is going to take care of the church. He's not going to shun its traditions, even when they are maybe at odds with what you might call PR in the modern world. But at the same time, he's going to bring that spirit of humility along with him.
Yeah, I mean, on that question of PR, Rebecca, this is an awkward question to ask, never mind answer, but I feel I should ask it because it's hard to ignore the comments. You look on the news stories about the Pope's flatmates and basically all the comments are essentially innuendo about him and his special friends living in. Do you think the Vatican might be concerned about how that implication might look to Catholics?
Are you saying because one of them is his 36-year-old, quite handsome personal secretary, Father Edgar Ivan Rimay-Cunha, whom he met during his time in Peru? I don't like these implications. No, I'll tell you who the people are that are going to be living with him. They're all fathers. So you've got Rimay-Cunha, who again has been his friend for a very long time, is now his personal secretary. I don't know about innuendo, but I just don't know if it's a good idea to live with your boss work-life balance-wise. But
right.
Apparently they are best buds. And we don't know the identities. This is all speculation, but the report in La Repubblica speculated that the other three could be the pontifical sacristans. They have responsibility for the Sistine Chapel, but by extension also for preparing vestments, chalices, altar linen, that kind of thing for the Pope's appearances, and also offering spiritual support to him as well. And historically, this task has always been undertaken by the Order of St. Augustine, which is quite convenient. And the sacristans currently are Father Bruno Salvestrini, who's Italian, Father Giovanni Rebaya, who's Filipino, and Father Augustine Chukwama Ugboma, who is Nigerian. So there's plenty of scope for some cross-cultural remake comedy as well.
Beautifully swerved. Arion, it has been the Pope's first 100 days. How do you mark his progress? It's interesting. He has kind of vanished from the news agenda, interestingly, I feel.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because 100 days may be a solid period to try to analyze political trajectories. It's a really short period of time in what might be a 15 to 20 year papacy in, let's face it, a 2 millennia old religion. So there's only so much that we can get from this in a sense. Although I think it is important to remember that Pope Leo didn't campaign to be Pope. He had no platform and he only learned that he was going to be Pope on the day of his election. But in these first 100 days, we can start to see some themes emerging. He's already addressed war and peace and migration and the environment, much like his predecessor, Pope Francis. And Francis was known as a pope of bold gestures, as Rebecca was kind of alluding to, which often upset a lot of people, particularly the conservative wing of the church. Leo's approach tends to be, at least so far, a bit more restrained, but I think many Catholics remain hopeful that he will carry forward the good bits of Francis's substance, even if his style is a little bit more understated. Though, again, a bit more grand in the vestments that he is willing to wear. But I think one of the early telling moments was when Pope Leo celebrated a new liturgy of Mass that emphasized the environment. And now that was actually in the works under Francis, but it came out under Leo, and it shows that he really cares about how climate change will affect particularly the poorer parts of the world that are seeing the really harsh effects of climate change more keenly. Also, earlier this month, Leo spoke to the Jubilee of Youth near Rome about the importance of solidarity between young people there and young people living through wars in Gaza and Ukraine. And he talked about his vision for a world that was free of violence. Now, this, of course, is a thing that probably every pope is going to talk about, but I think it spoke to the fact that he's not going to be afraid to weigh in on global issues like Francis did. So again, we're reading tea leaves here in everything that he does in this very early period. But I think we can at least start to determine some themes of his papacy.
And again, finally, Felicity, just to return to what you were saying earlier, the fact that we can analyse or attempt to analyse what he thinks as an individual, that his statements as an individual are taken so seriously, when he is just ultimately one man representing an enormous organisation of millions of people, you can see why, having a more collegiate lifestyle, innuendo aside, would just be helpful. It's quite a lonely job, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's right at the top. He's this lone figurehead in charge of overseeing this church of billions of people. There must be a huge weight of responsibility. It must be incredibly lonely. So yeah, I'm sure that's part of it. And I think it's refreshing and bold that he has admitted that he likes community and he wants people around him. And I think that's can only be a good thing, really. And he's also made it clear that he's very interested in geopolitics and has this kind of like affinity with connecting with other people. He wants to. I think he's announced that he wants to visit Lebanon as his first major international trip. Obviously, going to the Middle East, he's very interested in that. But it speaks to an idea of trying to resolve conflict, resolve wars, peace, community, people getting on from different faiths. And I think this probably all goes back to the Augustinian religious order from which he has clearly, picked up so much.
Yeah. Also, maybe he'll get to have a house party now, and that'd be nice for the Pope.